Hi people, how are you all? Guess who finally got around to making this video despite finishing this project a month ago now. But here I am, and I'm actually super excited to talk about it. I'm specifically going to be talking about my final 10-week project on my foundation art course, although there will probably be intersped bits of just the general foundation vibe within this video too. I'm going to be showing you digital scans of my work, like the one that you can see now. Partly because it was a digital submission thanks to the technological revolution that was 2020 that means everything is digital submissions these days, and partly because it's just easier. I've done traditional sketchbook tours and videos before, and not only is it really hard to script them, which means tons of editing and they end up being like 5 hours long, but the lighting always ends up terrible because of the weird way my desk is positioned in my room. And this project also spans about a dozen A2 sheets plus an A3 sketchbook, and switching back and forth between all that was going to cause absolute chaos on my surprisingly tiny desk, which I figured we didn't need the hassle of. Plus this way you don't have to watch me waving my hands around like an idiot, as you would usually have to do. So here we go. As you can see from the lovely mind map I've had on screen this entire time, I chose to do my project on my own specific retelling of the Gawain and the Green Knight story/poem. I started not with the mind map actually, but with a written project proposal, which I've not included here because it's basically just a big wall of very boring text outlining my goals and things, but then I did move on to the map here. One of the things that I kept forgetting on this course as a former maths and economics student is that when you're doing art, you really don't need to have an overly detailed mind map, and spending more than half of your time making it look pretty instead of putting down like really specific words is like perfectly acceptable and actually encouraged. It's one of those things about being at art school that just kind of makes me very happy for very little reason, because it's just like, yay, I get to make things pretty and I'm not going to get told off for it. I obviously followed that up with research, because every project has to start with some research. Although I actually did some of this before I made the mind map when I was trying to pick which topic I wanted to do for the project. In fact, I very nearly went with a Pride and Prejudice based topic instead for this project, but it didn't quite fit the time restraints for what I wanted to do, and so this won out. Plus, you guys know I'm obsessed with the Knights of the Round Table. That said, very tempted to revisit the Pride and Prejudice idea soon. I've been planning for years trying to work out a way I could do like a fantasy Pride and Prejudice retelling without having too many of the constraints of the sexism, but also the sexism kind of makes the story. I've been thinking on it for a while. I want to put dragons in. I want Lizzie Bennet with a dragon. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but we'll get there. Research is another thing that I have to keep reminding myself doesn't need to be as rigorous for art, as it's all about inspiration, and I suppose if you're covering a more difficult topic, you do need to have like research on sensitive topics and make sure you got facts and figures and anything you're going to put in text right. But because this was literally just an aesthetically pleasing project, it really didn't need to be as detailed as some of the stuff I'm used to. In fact, most of the research I did was, you know, referencing Ents and random fantasy shows that kind of, I thought had the right vibe for what I was doing. Particularly as the story I'm looking at here is a King Arthur story, and so the time periods for it vary wildly. It's not actually possible to be historically accurate, and so I could basically do what I wanted. I also just collected like a heck ton of pictures of other people's art that they'd done surrounding this story, different people's interpretations of the characters, just to look at, because why not, and because it counts towards my research criteria. Then I got straight into the fun stuff, the characters, starting of course with Gawain. Because this was a uni project, there are certain checkpoints, like I said, that you have to try and hit in your different development stages. So I've also got a whole page here of just various versions of Gawain from different stories, films, TV shows, etc. And a load of quotes from a translation of the original story that I had on me. I also must say that unlike many of the people in my class, I really liked working on the really big sheets. Taking an A2 page and just kind of sprawling ideas and sketches all over it was really satisfying and worked surprisingly well for me. I wouldn't want an actual sketchbook that big or to do casual sketches in a piece of paper that big, but when developing one like specific thing that I was focusing on, it was really good. I did have a couple of teething problems making Gawain here without trying to make him look too young, but still inexperienced, because in some of the stories he's like 19 and he's just become a knight, but he's also very clearly still an adult. And that was a lot harder to pull off than I thought, but I'm pretty happy with the outcome, and have already been working on an older design for Gawain, who, the version that will appear in my comic, obviously, who I've decided is definitely going to be the same person. This is just his backstory. I also did little digital turnarounds for each of the characters, which I posted a while back on my Instagram. I really liked doing the tiny colour test doodles, too, that you can see in the top right-hand corner here. This character in particular, Lane, was just really nice to draw because she was so different from the boys. It was like a little break to draw someone with really funky hair. I mean, I suppose they all have pretty funky hair, but like really just like big hair. I liked doing the big hair. It was fun. The Green Knight himself, though, was definitely the most fun to create because of all the fantasy stuff he's got going on. Although, honestly, it was a bit of pain getting the colour right, because trying to get contrast with that much green is basically impossible, although I did really love putting his ent feet on, because I was like, this is going to be super cool. Unfortunately, I don't think the ent feet actually made it into any of the final pages, just because of the way I'd cut it, but oh well. In fact, I think I remember the way I solved the colour issue here was I specifically did his colours first and worked out what greens I was going to use and how I was going to make them all work. Although I had a rough idea what I wanted to do for the other characters, so I tilted some slightly towards blue to match Gawain, but I specifically did his first, and then I adjusted everybody else's colours to match because he was always going to be the hardest character. It's also worth mentioning that this story, if you've never read or heard of it, has a fairy character in disguise kind of deal happening with Sir Berslac here, who appears both in his human form and as the Green Knight, whilst Gawain and the reader aren't aware that they're the same person. So I had a lot of fun adding like subtle details like his slightly pointed ears and his gloves to kind of show that link without it being entirely obvious. Did I actually manage to make it subtle? I have no idea, but it was certainly fun playing with it and hoping that people would see where I was coming from. It's also probably worth mentioning that throughout this project, I of course had to do ongoing artist research. It's one of those things I'm not great at. I struggled with it back when I did GCSE art, and I did occasionally leave it a couple of weeks and then just do a bulk dump of the stuff and backdate it a little. My advice to anyone else who is struggling with this kind of thing is just to automatically make a note of any artist you like or come across somewhere. I use the note section on my phone because I always had it on me, and that way when you get time to actually do your research, you don't get like bored of it in the first 5 minutes because you can't find or think of any artists. You just have a little list somewhere and you systematically go through them all and get some pictures, and it just gives you kind of the jump start when you finally make yourself do it. I also found it helps to find a method for actually writing your research up that really works for you. I found doing digital collection worked because it saved me the extra hassle of printing things, which is weird because I usually prefer to print and stick things because it allows me to break my task down into smaller bits and it doesn't require as much thought process, the sticking, once you've got the pieces. But with this, I just kind of wanted to get it done as fast as possible, and so I thought digital worked better. And then obviously you just write up as much as you can come up with. You only had to go into detail on some of these. Sometimes you can just take pictures of an artist's work and stick them in your file and just go, here's an artist I like. I think I had about 29 or so different artists by the end of the 10 weeks. That's like 3 a week-ish. But in the end, only 7 or 8 of them had more than 2 sentences written about them. So you can break it down into bits. Artist research can be useful too because you always have to show that you explored and experimented with a load of different styles with these sorts of things, and it gives you ideas for that. I've also discovered over the course of a year that if you're ever low on development work for an art course of any kind, doing a page or so of continuous line drawings of one of the things, I chose my character, Gawain here obviously, works really well. It's quick, surprisingly therapeutic, and often highlights which bits of the character or object you haven't got consistent yet, while also counting in that whole experimental trying new things kind of phase of the project. There were also so many workshops on and available during this project. I clearly did not attend all of them, but the ones I did were really useful, especially because I didn't do A-level art, and so things like watercolour technique were the kind of things I'd just been making up as I went along before now. Weirdly, making a big chart of colour combinations was one of the most useful things I did. Probably because my maths brain likes clear diagrams and my art brain likes the pretty colours, but it was also just super helpful for working out which paints matched closest to the digital colour samples I had and organising in that sense. Also, throughout the process, I had to make reflective notes. One of those things that's kind of annoying because I know that I and a lot of other artists, namely my friends I'm thinking, just sort of process things in their head as they're doing it, and unfortunately examiners can't read minds. I also found it particularly helpful here to just keep spare scraps of paper all over my desk that I could then write notes on as I was going and as I was thinking of them, and then just stick these straight onto the pages you can see here. That way, if I had a thought, I didn't have to make all the effort of getting out a sketchbook, you know, creating a background, finding an area to write it in, making it look neat. I could just jot it down and then stick that bit of paper in. You don't have to go too overboard with these as well. I feel like people overthink it. Most of my scrap reflections were things like, tried this funky pen, but it smudged loads and so was very inconvenient. Might experiment with intentional smudges later though. And that was it. And then at the end of the week, obviously, you can do a better overview where you go into and answer more of these, like, reflective questions and things about stuff you've learned. It was still usually just pretty, you know, simple stuff like, it would be really dumb to do this whole book digitally because I'm not sat close enough to a plug socket for my laptop next week, so I want to look at alternative media. You know, you're finding a problem, acknowledging the problem exists and going, well, this is what I'm going to do to fix it, and this is some other things that I've been thinking about. I also made a lot of tiny to-do lists as my timetable basically went to the dogs after the first 2 weeks or so were over because I got bored doing research and trashed my schedule over it. I didn't finish the costume design page for like 3 weeks. Hence redoing my schedule a few weeks before starting my final outcome and just generally replanning and changing my mind. And once again, I stuck it in my submission because it counts towards the points and things. I did try to branch out into some newer stuff, like working on actual buildings and backgrounds, which, if you guys have been around long enough, you know I am terrible at. And I had mixed successes with it. Ultimately, I didn't end up using this page much in the final outcome because I was slightly worried about running out of time finishing the whole thing and wasn't sure that the quality was going to match up and quite how I wanted to work. Also, I'd done a lot of the backgrounds using the lines with continuous line, and I knew I didn't want to use that on my characters, and so I just didn't really have time to kind of plan and make it more cohesive. Prop design was fun though. It's not something I've ever done much of, excluding the occasional sword handle for my comic, but this was very cool and I kind of wish I'd been able to do more because I really liked all the different axe handles I tried here and would love to try drawing some like ornate daggers or something sometime soon, but there really weren't enough significant weapons in this story for me to spend the time on it, but it's something I definitely want to try more of. Unfortunately, doing a book for my final outcome also went a foray into the one art area that I am actually worse at than backgrounds, and that is typography. I filled a sheet, I made a font, and honestly, I am not too proud of it. I would have liked to produce something more pleasant to look at than this, but I was on a time constraint, so that didn't happen. I've given font creation one more go since this and I have something much nicer I'm using for my comic, but I'm not sure that would have fit in this book that well anyway. I really wanted to use the dip pens because I was enjoying them, but when it came to writing out the different bits of my font, it ended up looking a bit messy and disconnected. I've since learned actually that if you get a piece of paper and you write out the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog sentence, and then digitally take those letters and stick them into the boxes, it tends to work much better than when you're trying to write each letter on its own for creating fonts, but I did not know that at this time, and so yeah, it's a bit dodgy. I had slightly more fun on the typography challenge I did though, because it was more like an illustrated alphabet than anything else, or at least that's how I chose to treat it. I only had one day to do each letter too, so if one turned out a little bit dodgy, W, then it really didn't matter, so it was loads of fun. I also had a lot of fun trying to stretch to find a word or character for every letter as well, which was harder than you would think. Apparently there are no Knights of the Round Table with a name beginning with O. One of the things I really did hate about foundation, though, was the Pecha. I have said it before and I will say it again, that doing art foundations was the best decision I have ever made. I've absolutely loved this last year so much that I was genuinely disappointed when term ended and I realised I was going to be left to my devices all summer. But the Pecha, I hated. It's a special type of presentation where you get 20 seconds per slide and then the slide automatically moves on regardless of if you've finished talking. We all got 4 slides, 2 for artists and 2 for a project, and we were all meant to present in front of the group. Most of us did. It was kind of hell. Presenting is not something I'm good at, and honestly, it just gave me so much anxiety. But I'm mentioning it here because I did still do it. I survived, and the fact that I made it through this thing that was practically designed to stress me out without freezing up or crying is really big for me, and I'm kind of weirdly proud of myself and how far I've come. I also want to mention it because, you know, not all of art school was, you know, sunshine and rainbows. I get that there are different things that different people struggle with. This was something I struggled with. But I also feel like it's a kind of testament to how much this course has helped me as a person that I was able to make it through this in relatively one solid piece. But back to more fun things. Bookmaking workshop. This was very fun. I'm actually using the practice book on the left there to record notes on the story for my comic, but I also just really like the hands-onness of making tiny books, and my maths brain was very satisfied when I made up my tiny mock book and numbered all the pages and then pulled it apart again to get the layout right. It was just all very fun, all very satisfying. I kind of want to buy some more greyboard and just make some little journals on my own at home because it was so fun and so therapeutic stitching it together. I had this really lovely green metallic thread that my grandma bought me years ago back when I was into sewing, and it looks so funky and I'm very proud of it. Now, like I said, my timetable kind of dissolved a little, so my next task, the story planning and the storyboarding, all got done in 2 days. I technically had the Easter holidays too, but I was away for the first week of them, and so very much stressed myself out trying to get all this done before I left. Don't be like me. Be nice to yourself and that. I really didn't need to panic either, because my uni place for next year is unconditional, so whatever grade I get for this project is irrelevant, and I got myself way too worked up about this. Still, I'm quite proud of these, and I didn't even change that many of the pages after the holidays. I even thought to check how the double pages would look and everything. But to be fair, it was probably the biggest single task in the whole project, and I probably should have given myself more time for it, and certainly allowed myself to not stress so much. Over the holidays, I did the initial sketches digitally because at home I can do more than 2 hours without my laptop dying because I have an actual charger, and also because it allowed me to get the proportions of everything perfect without having to constantly rub stuff out. You can use the lasso tool and the undo button and all those amazing things to make sure that I had all the anatomy right on all the characters and I was really happy with the way they were all looking. Then I traced the sketches and painted. I should have painted my pages bigger, I'm aware of that now. I did them slightly smaller than A3 because that way I could fit 2 spreads to a sheet of watercolour paper, which was just slightly smaller than an A2 sheet of paper, which was kind of bugging me. And yes, I did save the environment a little bit by using less paper, but quality took a substantial hit because of it. I also hadn't really worked out what I was going to do with the backgrounds until I got here, other than I wasn't going to make them detailed, and so I sort of kind of just improvised them on the spot. It all could have been slightly better planned out, and as a general rule, just always make your pages bigger than you need them to be, because that way you can get more detail in the line work and you won't have weird gaps that you then have to go fix digitally. One thing I have learned about art courses, though, is that the same as academic subjects, there are always ways to play the system and hit all the marking indicators, and one of those is to just save stuff all the time. I spent maybe half an hour trying out different colour combos for this cover at most, and I got a whole slide of development work out of it. There were actually a couple more of these, but I was running out of space on my presentation for the number of slides we were allowed. But similar to doing a maths paper where you have a system to follow, or writing an essay when there are certain things you need to go through, like, you know, your explanation and your analysis, doing art is very much a case of, here are the markers you've got to hit. Now, you can sometimes just hit them by just saving and putting things in your presentation, even if they feel small. And I like to think this is one of the things that I adapted to quite well, given how horrendous I was at it in GCSE. It's one of the reasons why I quit GCSE art. Well, quit art after GCSE, because I was just so fed up of, you know, having to do the artist research and having to do all these tests and things. Whereas now I sort of get why we do them, because sometimes you do have a brilliant idea coming from some of this development work, and sometimes you don't, but that's fine, because it means you can put it on the slide and you can show the examiners, look, I tried, I thought about what I was doing before I did it, I showed basic common sense, and they don't know that you've done that unless you spell it out for them, because, like I said, examiners cannot read minds. Next, I added text. Twice, actually. The first time I printed, I had a combination of quality issues, and then my friend, who is an angel and a lifesaver, by the way, found a load of typos, which I was kind of mad about at the time, but, you know. So I retyped to both fix the typos and reprinted again. Honestly, printing was the messiest part of the whole project, I think. I'm still not entirely sure I formatted the type either that great. But like I said, I suck at typography. I was trying to make the words show up properly on the different backgrounds. It didn't work perfectly, but I did my best. Then I assembled the thing. I spent a little while getting the double-sided printing to work, and then I had a lot of fun during the very satisfying, like I said, process of stitching this thing together. It was so much fun, very, very therapeutic. If anyone wants it, I can probably link the video that I used to learn how to do the stitchings. I didn't get that from the workshop, we were using ring binders in workshop, but my friend sent me this great video on how to bind journals, and very interesting, very cool watch. I'll definitely link it. It was loads of fun. And that's the whole project. There were certainly things I would do differently if I did this again, not least trying to improve my general art skills for a higher quality outcome. But I had so much fun doing this. I absolutely loved going into uni each day, into my little adorable workspace and just drawing and creating. You would have thought it would have sunk into me by now that this is my life and that going in and drawing is actual work, but nope. Maybe when I head off to uni proper in September it will. Probably not. I honestly can't quite comprehend the fact that I've gotten into art uni either. I can't believe it's over, to be honest. This course was the best thing I have ever decided to do, and it gave me hope again after a really awful year. Couple of years, to be honest, but the last one was the worst. And it made me finally believe, or at least stop outright denying, that I can actually do this, and there is a world in which this could be what I am good at, and I could enjoy it. No, I will not ever be the best, but that doesn't matter. Not to mention how lovely and friendly everyone was on the course, especially the tutors. Anyone else who's going to MMU in September, the tutors are brilliant and amazing, and some of the best part. Rely on them, use them, let them help you. They're so great. And also just, you know, all the amazing friends I made, and I cannot wait for what comes next. It's just been so brilliant. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about the foundation, please feel free to comment them down below. I would love to answer them and talk to people. But other than that, I will see you all soon. Bye.